Good afternoon all. Sounds strange saying good afternoon on this webinar, but now we've moved our time to 12:30 to accommodate people. I hope you've all got your lunch out in front of you, nice coffee, some nice sandwiches. Me, I'm starving, but I've got a cornetto in the freezer waiting to be devoured afterwards. So here we go. So if you can hear me, if you can hear us all, do the usual. If you could please just drop your comments into the chat room that you can hear us. Again, it's a very busy webinar. We've had quite a lot of people asked to move the webinar from 10 o'clock because the market's getting busier for them, which is awesome news to hear. So as people start to log in, okay, what I'd like to say is welcome Paul Sharpe back. I know we pressed him, ganged him last week, but we might press gang him again even more to talk about and carry on our discussion with regards to marginal gains and regards to how to sort of really build the business and work from there. We had quite a lot of discussion last week with regards to the recruitment process. And Paul, the Pauls and I had a look at that and thought, actually, considering the feedback that we got from last week's, we should really sort of retouch on a couple of the points in there and then expand on the whole area. So again, we've got quite a lot to sort of push through. We are going to try take 20 minutes on each topic. Okay, so we're going to look at the recruitment process, the hardware and software that's out there and training, and then move from there. So let's first of all throw this out over to, let's look to Mr. Jacobs first and foremost. It's your Sunday name, Paul, for you today. So we're going to look at that and say, right, okay, last week we started to talk very much about the recruitment process. And let's sort of have a very quick view on, we talked very much about reviewing monthly the recruitment process. Why is that important, do you think?
Well, first and foremost, good afternoon, everybody. And of course, the reason we overran last week was clearly down to Paul Sharpe, who didn't pause for breath at any point whatsoever. Unlike Howard and I, who are always very succinct and to the point. Is that right, Howard?
Correct.
Correct.
No comment.
No comment. And just before we go any further, there was a question raised by Mr. David Barrett, who asked the question, do I think that Arsenal will be any better next season? I think the answer to that, as we all know, David, is a no. So I'll just get that out there so that we can just get rid of that. As everybody knows, unfortunately for my sins, I'm an ardent Arsenal fan, which is why I've got no hair and I'm still shrinking from 5'4". So back to the question that Howard raised. Why do we want to review our monthly training plan? And I think the issue here is that we're entering a brand new market, as everybody is very well aware, very different from anything that anybody's ever experienced before. I mean, many of us have been through recessions, and even sort of if you look at the banking crisis at the back end of the last decade, you consider that a depression. And so there are quite a few of us have got the knowledge and experience and the expertise to guide our businesses through what we know will be a relatively tough time with high unemployment, unfortunately, coming our way. An awful lot of candidates on the market. We believe a spike in the provision of interim and temporary workers before the permanent market recovers next year, as we're all expecting. And we see that sort of hockey stick situation, that Nike swoosh situation occurring next year as the country, and let's hope the globe, starts to recover from the pandemic. So, but additional to that, of course, is we have the lovely Brexit subject. Everybody seems to be ignoring coming up very, very soon, and not least the continuing issues with lockdown and the various spikes that we're experiencing. And the truth is that the world of work is very different now to the one we left behind around March. So when you're looking at training your people, looking at reviewing the way in which we start to prepare our guys for this new world of work, we have to really reconsider virtually everything that we thought was normal, everything that we've always done in the past, to some degree, whether it's lesser or greater, has to be changed. We've said for some period of time now that building relationships with customers is going to become even more important going forward, because very much the subject matter that we've been embracing is this issue of retained and how would I express this, exclusive opportunities. And Paul is going to talk shortly about mini RPOs and mini MSPs. Sounds like an ice lolly, but actually it's much more interesting than that. Don't know, we've got ice creams and ice lollies on our minds, Howard. So I think that's something we'll come to later. But I think here's the opportunity we've all been craving to get closer to clients and start to look at how we develop our trusted advisor positioning. And this is something that I think we've really got to focus on. And in particular, working these relationships from a distance via things like Zoom, as we've been discussing in the past.
So I think it's an interesting point, as the comment is about, processing and what do we review on a monthly basis. And I think what lockdown has certainly taught me, and I've been sort of looking at our clients, is that if we don't review our processes constantly, then our processes get left behind. And I think I was presenting up in Scotland a couple of years ago, and I've commented that the digital wave is coming, and unless you react to the digital wave, you will get swept away. And obviously the digital wave was accelerated hugely by COVID-19, and a lot of people have now changed the way they're recruiting. But what that means is it's the evolution of the actual recruitment processes, and how do we push those processes to make our candidate and our client journey so much better. And what that means is when we focus on what our employee journey is like, then if we can get a better employee journey, then we start to get a better understanding of our marketplace. So those people are asking questions like, should I be interviewing candidates face to face? Should I be seeing clients face to face? And should I be seeing my staff face to face? The answer is, where possible, and considering, medical and social distancing, etc., you should be out visiting your clients and your candidates where you feel comfortable and safe, or at least inviting them into your office. If we can then start to train and develop our staff in a more client-facing way, then what we'll tend to find is that they give our candidates and our clients a better service. And if they can give their candidate and client a better journey through their recruitment process, then what we start to see is value. And what's going to change hugely as we come out of this marketplace, as we've talked for a number of months about, is the value that we create. And if you start to talk about percentage fees, you start to talk about hourly fees, etc., clients are going to be looking to reduce their recruitment spend. And I will use that word wisely, their recruitment spend. That does not say that they're going to reduce the recruitment fees, but that is an area that they will certainly look at if they do not see value or perceive value in the way that we deal with themselves and the way that we deal with our candidates. And I was talking last week to a client about your best sales force on site are your candidates. So if we give our candidates the perfect journey through the recruitment process, and that means working to streamline the client's recruitment process as well, then you have a secondary sales force out there on site constantly. So I think constantly reviewing your recruitment process and seeing what's good and what's bad is really important, and then making sure how you link that to your training plan to make sure that you are constantly updating your training of your staff, make sure that they are on the journey and moving forward, is the process that we need to look for. And as we start to look at that, we've got to start to think about how that would manifest itself in some of the service offerings that we are looking to give to our clients. So that's where Mr. Sharpe comes in. We talk about, last week we had a very sort of brief conversation about mini RPO and maximizing our client relationships. Let's take that conversation to the next step, and the next step from where we were last week, Paul.
Okay, I think I'm probably just going to take a step back if I can. I think when you're talking about, development and training, learning and training plans for each individual member of staff, I think the first and foremost thing is to understand the data for each individual team member. And by that, I mean looking at sort of ratios. So, from my experience, if you've got all the data, and this then links back into CRMs and everything else, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. If you're measuring the data, then you can understand the ratios. If you can understand the ratios, then you can understand where the individual is doing well and where they may be struggling. And if you understand that, then you, from my perspective, you can then put together a really proper, focused training plan around where that individual consultant needs it. I think when we talk about business development, and I think I mentioned this last week, I actually hate the word business development. It sounds very cold. It sounds very salesy. And as we spoke about last week, I think we're moving much more into much more of a consultative world, whereby people want to be consulted They want to speak to an expert. They want a long-term relationship. They want to speak to an expert in that particular field. It might be that that person can solve a problem or help give advice. And this is what our client, I think a lot of clients are seeking at this moment in time. They're actually seeking advice or information that can help them solve problems. They may not necessarily be recruiting the same way with the same volume that they had been previously. So therefore, that begs a question. Therefore, you know, how do you create something of interest for the client? How do you become an expert in your field? How do you make sure you've got something which is going to create or stimulate conversation? So there's two ways for me in terms of developing relationships. Either I'm an expert in the field and therefore somebody wants to come and talk to me because I can help them solve a problem. Or it may be with that individual, we've got some common interest and some mutual contacts. And you touched on it there, Howard. I think one of the things we do not particularly well of in the industry is use referrals. Referrals is, for me, the easiest and best way to open up doors. If I get an email or a text from somebody saying, can I please refer so-and-so to you, I will always, out of courtesy, say yes to that individual because they're already in my network. So I think that the referral bit is really interesting. If you then, and I'm conscious of time, because Paul did just criticise me, by the way, for talking too much. What I should have added just at the very start is just prior to turning the webcams on and going live, Paul, because he's so short, had to sit on a cushion to elevate him to make the camera fit his face perfectly. Not that he couldn't fit his face perfectly, but at least I don't have to sit on a cushion. Anyway, back to the topic on hand. I think I talked about this last week. I think this then plays into your marketing strategy. And, you know, how can you create conversations with either your contacts, your network, and stimulate, you know, meetings. And I think most clients are still doing more virtual meetings than face-to-face meetings. But if you've got something of interest, if they know that they're going to get some really good market data from you, or something around, you know, the latest technologies to facilitate onboarding, or some data around, you know, candidate experiences over the last sort of 12 months collated into a nice sort of format, or, you know, understanding that they're going to be recruiting .NET developers in Northampton over the next 12 months, sending them some market data on .NET developers in Northampton over the next 12 months, then it's about giving and sharing as much as what you possibly can. And I think sometimes we almost feel that we're going to give the client the answer, and we may in some cases, but it's okay, because the minute they struggle, they're going to come back to you. But what it is going to help you do is stand out from the crowd and stand out from the norm by giving something to the client. And from my perspective, that's where, you know, the relationship sort of starts. And all my best relationships are the ones that I've given advice and been very consultative. It's not where I've sold the best deal or, you know, the most complex solution. It's about giving that advice.
Howard, I'll just pick up on something. Thanks, Paul, and for making reference to my very short stature. I appreciate it. No, I just want to pick up on a couple of quick points that Paul makes. Very good points. So I think that when we look at this issue of relationship building, and it's one thing I've always said. I've been, as you guys know, I've been in the recruitment industry for 44 years, a long time now. And although obviously everything has changed beyond recognition, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years from a technological perspective, one thing that's been a constant has always been about developing relationships, people by people. And that's always been the adage in our industry. It's still the adage in our industry. And it becomes more and more essential and important. Paul just made that point very well. And I think that what we need to be absolutely doing is working towards this. So I've always called it a trusted advisor position. And I think as you guys will all know that are listening, you know, your best relationships with your clients have been developed over many years. It's trust is a word we throw away very easily these days, but it takes a very long time to build that level of relationship within our business lives, let alone our personal lives. And it's something you have to nurture once you have it, take care of it, because if you lose it, you won't get it back. And I think for the people that you engage in your business, having people that are capable, where they are customer facing of building those relationships, people with very high emotional intelligence, has never been more important than it is today. And yet I think this new world of work is something that is going to move us back into that positioning where we are able, I hope, to start to rekindle relationships, develop relationships, and ally those human relationships with ever increasingly more sophisticated technology that is beginning to become very prevalent in our industry sector and indeed within society as a whole. If you can get that nice synchronicity between great people, very attractive personalities, people that are authentic, that care a lot, as Paul's just described, allied to, and we're going to talk about this shortly, really good quality technology that will take the grunt work out of what we do in the industry so we can focus on developing relationships, meeting clients more, whether that's virtual or face-to-face, and indeed the same with candidates, then you got yourself a great business. And I think, talking back to Paul's point, expertise, working in very specific sectors, having niche knowledge and expertise has been very important for some period of time and becomes increasingly more important as we move forward. Just a quick point I just want to add. I was with a client quite recently and we broke down the recruitment process. It was perms, not temp or interim, but it was the perm recruitment process into 30 different sections. I mean, literally from talking to the candidate for the first time through to making a placement, and then beyond the placement, that 30-day period, 4-week notice period, when people are waiting to start a job, keeping our candidates warm and engaged, and then a 12 to 16-week period post-placement. When we broke it down, we came up with 30 different elements, different links in the chain. And we analyzed every single element and started to think about how we would improve every aspect of every element of that recruitment process. You can't look at it from the perspective as a whole. You can't say, we're going to improve our permanent placement process. You really do have to drill down into the various elements. And that, back to the first question Howard raised, how do we improve the processes? How do we improve our training for our people? You've got to go back and actually really dig into every little bit. Now, as we've talked about many, many times, this is the whole sort of Ford Model T process. You don't build a car. You don't get one guy to build an entire car. You break it down into various elements. And that's what you've all got to do when you look at every element of the processes that we engage within our businesses relative to the service of our clients, looking after our clients and our candidates. Break it down into minor little elements, then break those elements down into various points. When you break it into that kind of detail, then you will quite comfortably spot the areas where the 1% improvements we've always talked about become very evident. So yes, you tear up virtually everything you've ever done and you start to reanalyze everything that you want to do going forward.
So it's quite interesting though when you sort of put it in those two ways from the two pools. What we're saying is that really, if we get our process right and maximize our process with regards to time and actually impact, then we can start to sell things to our clients that our client may have never seen before, such as data, and it's using that data. So one of the questions that was asked this week is, what's the most important piece of technology you would buy now? And it's not so much buying new technology. If you really want to sort of look at the technology that can really put you on a different pedestal, is start to look at your CRM and how you use your CRM. If you can extract data, as Paul said there, if there's 30 processes within the recruitment sort of flow, and you can start to develop data out of that process, you can start going back to clients and helping them streamline their process. If you can streamline their process, you can reduce their cost of recruitment quite considerably, because the time is the most expensive thing that they have, but also it's opportunity loss, because the opportunity of them not working on their current job whilst they're recruiting is also really important. So if we start to look at what we do with our CRM. So you should review your CRM. If your CRM isn't fit for purpose, there are lots of CRMs out there that are genuinely fit for purpose and worlds apart from some of the CRMs that I've seen just recently. If you're not using a CRM, you can't underestimate the amount of data that you are storing, never being able to use, the amount of candidates that you're storing, never be able to regenerate, because we're not great at thinking about who we got in an Excel file or who we got here, etc. where CRM can bring all that data to you and bring all that information to you. So if you can really start to build that information, then you start to really generate things that your stakeholder relationships will start to really blossom, because you can start taking to them information that they haven't got before. And that means when we start talking information about the marketplace, we will include a price point, and that means we can start to have genuine conversations about how we can drive our prices up during a recession period, not reducing them, but still reducing their overall cost of recruitment across the whole process. So it's an interesting question that I'm going to throw back to you two. Now, driving stakeholder relationships and increasing price point, how?
Okay, so just a quick point I wanted to make. Back in my Hudson days, when we were looking at upselling, cross-selling, developing deeper relationships with certain clients, we did an exercise where we called it sort of C-suite selling. It's not easy to say at this time of the day, but essentially it was really looking at who people buy. So what we did when we were plotting, looking at that whole sort of Miller-Hyman thing where you're looking at who sits where in a business, we said, well, okay, who connects with the owner or the chief executive? That probably should be the owner of our business or the chief executive in our business, because they've obviously got a lot in common. Who should be talking to their FD? Should it be me, the junior consultant, or should it be the guy that manages our finances, the finance director? So we were kind of looking at who were the key purchasers in an organization, the people of influence in an organization, and we were matching within our business the people that had most in common in terms of seniority and experience with those people, and we were connecting with a variety of people within those organizations at different levels. What that means from this point of view in relation to moving on and starting to look at how we develop relationships, is something that you need to be doing is looking very carefully at the target clients that you're trying to develop more business from or start to do business with, and say to yourselves, who is the best person to be contacting each of these individuals as you map out who to speak to within an organization. Because too often, I'm afraid, I see when we talk about business development, I know it's an expression Paul doesn't like particularly, but when we talk about business development and we consider that when we look at our targets, too often I see consultants or relatively inexperienced people being tasked with trying to get appointments, meetings with clients, when in fact, sometimes, and you guys will all know this, it has to be down to the senior people in the organization to contact the senior people in their clients, because there's a greater possibility they'll take the calls. There's an even greater possibility there'll be a level of empathy between the two parties. And we often ask rather inexperienced people in our businesses to try to break open doors, which in itself is not easy at the best of times, and try to connect with people that are frankly not going to be particularly attracted to the people within our business. Not because they're lesser souls than the rest of us, but simply because they don't have the experience or to make that connection. I think when you are looking as you go into this new world of work, at who you're going to start winning business from, you really do need to sit down as a senior team and start making do that mapping planning exercise.
It's quite interesting, that comment there, Paul, is what we've been saying for quite a long time, that owners of businesses, 80% of their time should be out client facing and developing clients. But that also means that they're out with their staff, helping their staff developing clients again. So it's more now about that collaborative environment where staff now feel that touch and that warmth of that business owner, taking them out, helping them develop, helping to build that client up for them, which they are going to reap the rewards from. But obviously, ultimately, the business owner reaps the rewards for that. So that layer selling is really important, and how that layer selling goes on. So it's all about sort of looking at how that does. The other 20% of the time then is obviously about building the culture, building the strategy, and managing the people in the business. So working from there. And I think if you get that and you get that value right, then obviously price, you can start to drive price up. Paul Sharpe, your comments on that.
Thank you. I think for me, I think if you are selling, then you're always going to be comparable to another agency. And if you're selling and you can be compared, then my experience, particularly we're dealing with procurement people, is that you're going to get driven down on cost and price. So the trick here is to make sure that you cannot be compared, or what you provide that organisation is different to every other agency. And whilst you still might be providing an individual to fill a job, at the end of the day, it's the wraparound that will help you stand out from the crowd. And it's usually the wraparound that an organisation will really benefit. So if you're dealing with a head of data and you're used to providing that head of data with market information, that individual is attending, networking events, you've facilitated him being introduced to other people doing a similar role in other organizations. If you're providing data on where candidates are coming from, I've even for hiring managers told them where they hire people from and where they lose people to. And then I've gone out to those candidates or those organizations to try and find out what is it about those organizations that that forces people or drives people from their business to a competitor's business. So it's all this value add, and this comes back to being the consultative or playing a consultative part in the sales process. The more consultative you are, the more you're going to defend your pricing. And if you can defend your pricing, then I think sometimes defending it, especially in the here and now, is probably a very good achievement. I think from here on in, it's how you either grow your market share within that organization, or you start to spot additional opportunities that you can develop. But you're only going to do that if you're at that trusted advisor level.
So I think there's an interesting point. Before we sort of move on, there's an interesting point there, that what we're talking about is really creating your own market within a marketplace. And I've been describing this as the last couple of weeks with clients, is that the bloodbath of recruitment is there's a sandwich on a seashore with 10,000 seagulls trying to eat the sandwich, all pecking each other and creating that bloodbath of recruitment. That's what recruitment's like. They're around the client and they're all going in there. Where you watch the smart seagull, sits on the outskirts of that, waits for someone to sit down to eat a sandwich, and then goes and sits next to the person eating the sandwich, and the person feeds the sandwich. Different proposition. So they're in their own blue ocean of recruitment, rather than in that bloodbath of recruitment where everyone's thinking. So we've got to level our services up to give something different. It's interesting, Paul, you talked about giving something different. I remember going to see a client, and we'd done 2 heat maps. We had a heat map of a 50-mile radius of their company, and every company in their radius that took the similar staff with them. And we gave this heat map and said, this is a heat map of your competition. And he went, well, that's not particularly very great. We then threw a heat map over the top of that, which had all the candidates in the marketplace, and said every candidate on that heat map we'd interviewed, and we knew exactly what salary they'd want, what bonuses they had, etc., etc. And he went, how much do you want for that heat map? He wasn't bothered about our recruitment service. He just wanted to pay for the information. We said, well, this is what we do. We provide a service and we'll give you this type of information. So it was all that information hungry. But what he didn't realize is that we have this type of information, and we created this heat map, very simple to do. And all of a sudden, a client sat there going, oh my God, you're in touch with all of these candidates and they're all working with our competition. Then you can start to really feed that. And I think that goes into the next question as we start to move on, is regarding how do we spend more time client facing than actually doing administrative work or things that we find really slow. And again, I was speaking to a client last week who are changing their CRM, thankfully, because to put a client note on was more than 12 clicks. So you can imagine how long it takes to put a client note on. No wonder their staff didn't want to use their CRM. So let's look at hardware and software and talk about what we think is the right things to be doing with regards to hardware and software, and what's the benefit of bringing AI into our business.
Well, thanks, Howard. I think one of the things I just want to pick up on something that Paul said a moment ago, and one of the questions from my good friend Joe is, what should we stop doing to create more time? And we have got to, as managers, as leaders of businesses, spend far more time outwardly gazing, if that's the expression, looking outside of the business rather than getting too involved, if we can avoid it, in the minutiae of running our businesses, in the sense of dealing with a lot of the issues that take up an enormous amount of our time, i.e. staff issues and so forth. I think one of the things that makes a great company, and indeed you can come outside of the recruitment industry, when you look at the people who are unquestionably hugely successful in business, you'll find that they're very high profile. They're people that spend a great deal of time networking in front of clients. They attend conferences, network events. They're very involved in the media. They create a noise for their business. They create a great deal of media profile for the organization. And the way they've managed to do that is by getting great people around them. They delegate responsibility. They make sure that people are well trained and highly motivated, that they have a culture within the company that is transparent, it's open. They seek advice from the people they work with. They take advice. They often use that advice, implement great ideas. People feel very bought into the organizations that they work in, heart and soul stuff, heart and minds. And I think we've got to really work at making sure that the people that we have in our businesses as we emerge from this situation are people we truly love having in the organization. That if you like, and maybe controversially, we take this moment to consider getting rid of negative influences around us. I've always felt very strongly that life's too short to have negative people around you. It really is. It's just so wearing. You get to a point, I think, where you have to make some decisions about whether there's a space in your business for people with those attitudes. I'd much rather have, if you like, and this is going to sound odd, I'd rather have a lower performing positive person, provided their performance is acceptable, than a high performing pain in the posterior working in my business. And life's too short. I really mean that. Make sure you have positive people around you. They bring joy into your life. It makes it fun to come in every day. And you can learn to trust people. Indeed, you will trust those people because they've bought very much into the ethos and the culture of your company. And they will take on extra responsibility. You will be able to delegate to them because they're passionate, at least as passionate about your business as you are. And if you can achieve that, that gives you the space and time to spend significantly more time with your clients. All the things we've been talking around here about getting closer to clients, building that trusted advisor positioning, getting exclusivity. I mean, Paul hasn't had a moment to speak yet about mini RPOs. I'd love to hear Paul's view about that. He's got a lot of experience around that kind of business. And I feel that's so important to us. And then one of the things that you've mentioned, Howard, is, artificial intelligence. Well, if I'm going to answer that question, I'm going to say one thing, very important thing. Let's use the technology that's out there already. I mean, people are talking about, we must use video platforms as if that's something new. This stuff's been out there for years. We've just ignored it by and large. Now we're using it. Now we're realizing it's very effective and it's going to become more sophisticated. Please, if you're going to buy technology, you don't have to buy the whizziest thing on the market or the newest thing on the market, but please select things that create time for you. Look at the software that will enable you to parse candidates quicker. Look at the software that will enable you to search for candidates and clients far better and more accurately than you can. Consider video platforms, of course. Look at candidate tracking systems and consider how we use and adopt those in our businesses. Look at the things that will take away the grunt work. Let the robots do things far more accurately and quicker than we can. Don't worry too much about the cost, because if you create more time for you and your people to use your human skills in getting in front of clients and developing those relationships, networking, attending meetings, attending conferences, doing work on the media, the investment you place into the technology will come back to you over and over and over and over again. So for me, I think these things are linked. If you're going to be brilliant owners and directors and leaders, which I know you are, you want to become even more adept and superior to the position you were in prior to this downturn, please work really hard at getting the right people around you so you can learn to trust and delegate to them. And in that way, you can spend 70% of your time looking outside of the business at the trends, talking to your clients, rather than 70% internally looking at the people that work with you and gazing at the four walls. You can be the most expert individual in the industry, but if you sit in your office 5 days a week and you don't get out and talk to your clients or get out and talk to the local or even the global business community, then it doesn't matter that you're an expert. No one knows about it.
So I think there's a question that all business owners, managers, etc., should sort of think about, is that when you buy a piece of software, if you don't understand how to use it, how to maximize it, and how to get a return on investment from it, and the question is, why have you bought it? If you've just been sold something, you've gone to an expo, whatever it be, someone's rung you up and you've been sold the ultimate sale and you've bought it hook, line and sinker, and then you implement it, you've got to start to think how you use it and how you develop it. So training and development of that software is really important, whether it be a CRM, whether it be an ATS, whether it be, you know, a lead developing system, etc. How you use it is really important. And I think when I go talk to people about software, they don't understand how they use it, and therefore they don't understand how their consultants feel using it. And therefore, they've got to understand from its user point of view, is it fit for purpose? And I always think if you want to trial technology, you just trial it yourself, but you also must put it into your users and get them to trial it, because it's your users that are going to use it constantly and develop it. And if you can't extract data and you're not getting stuff developed on it, then again, it's to me, it's a piece of software that isn't worth buying. You have to buy software that is consistently developing over time. And Paul and I, we've spoken to a number of software developers and providers over the years, and you look at some of the big CRMs who are constantly updating their systems, and they constantly have updates coming out for free of charge. And then we speak to other people who are doing various things in the recruitment marketplace that have been trying to develop their system for the last 4 or 5 years and keep falling out with developers because they don't let their developers get on with it and work with it. And they're paying for that, where you could actually pay for it yourself by looking at cloud-based systems where they do all the development for you. So you've got to start to think about, are you truly maximizing the cost of the systems that you have in your business? And if not, then it's very, very simple. Get rid of the system and find something that is more cost effective, that your consultants will use, and that you can create a return on investment for your clients and give you a competitive edge. Paul, you've dealt with an awful lot of systems with regards to RPO and that sort of mini RPO status. Let's use that as a link into that RPO conversation.
I think the first and foremost thing, I think if you're talking about investing in technology, then I think the question I ask is you know, what's changed in the market and what do you need now more than ever before? And I think we've touched upon it a little bit, you know, switching from a candidate-driven market to a client-driven market. You know, most people will have read over the weekend that the hotel in Manchester, that's in the promised land in the north, Paul Jacobs, advertised for a receptionist role and had over 1,000 applications in 24 hours, which is just absolutely nuts. Prior to leaving Interquest, you know, we'd started to get 250 jobs within 24 hours for developer roles, and you know, specifically around sort of .NET and product roles. So I guess the question, therefore, from a recruiter perspective, is how does the technology enable them to cope with that influx of applications? Because I think that's going to be a really big driver and important key factor over the next sort of 12 months. So if your CRM can't parse, if it doesn't pre-populate the CV or the application into something a little bit more polished, if it doesn't add any value, if you're not getting applications and candidates back into your CRM that are coded in a specific way, which makes it really easy for the consultant to then search and find, then that's where I would probably be putting my money here and now. And there are loads of technology platforms out there, and I know, Howard, you know, you and Paul are very close to a lot of those technology providers as well, and I'm sure you'd help anybody specifically around giving that element of advice. In terms of RPO, I think whether it be RPO or MSP, RPO is perm, MSP is non-perm in a nutshell for me. Different bits of lingo mean slightly different things to different people. I think one of the opportunities, if you're out there having conversations with people, if people genuinely think that you are being consultative rather than selling, and you are listening, and we talked about building trust. Trust for me is built upon 3 things. It's built around logic, authenticity, and empathy. A key part of the empathy part is listening. If you are truly listening to your customer, you'll find out where their pain points are. It might be that they are advertising for roles and they're struggling in the short term because they've lost some heads to deal with the amount of volume of applications coming into the business. As a business owner or director, could you parachute one of your members of staff on site to, you know, help cope with that demand, you know, 2 days a week? Or could they do it remotely 2 days a week and pre-populate their internal applicant tracking system. What can you do around taking work away that's helping them here and now, given that the landscape has changed enormously over the last 3 weeks? And I'll say this, the best solutions that I've provided to a client have normally come from a very small opportunity. So it might be that they have suddenly got to find some skills in a certain location and they're struggling. And they may be struggling because they may have lost people within that team. Could you wrap together a mini project and therefore a unique service offering around picking off a certain number of roles? If they've got some contractors or temps, can you offer a small bespoke service around payrolling? Because these for me are the acorns, and they are the acorns that then enable you to get into that organization, build your relationship even more, become even more sticky with your client. And these are opportunities that for me have developed onto something a lot more bigger. But it's usually the small bits that usually lead on to it. I'll just sort of share one story. I was introduced to the HRD for a company called Collinson about 2 years ago from a friend. So I asked for a referral. I said, could you introduce me to your boss? And can I sort of share some market intelligence with you? And the answer was, yeah, if you're going to make me look good, Paul, through me sponsoring you into my boss, I'll do that all day long, but just make sure you look good. I met the HR director. We had an hour and a half booked in the diary. We were in there for 2.5 hours. He actually cancelled his meeting after me because he was enjoying so much what I was sharing. By being more consultative and being different, then when that organisation went out to tender, we were already on the front foot because we already had that relationship. So getting in there early is really important. But I think sometimes we think, particularly in the SME world, that you can't compete with the big boys. You absolutely can. You've just got to find those really small opportunities, wrap it into a service offering. You'll have to price it up differently, but you can make really good money out of some of these projects.
It's quite interesting, isn't it, that we talk about supplying clients with, curing their problems, finding a problem, looking to cure our problems. And yet we speak to so many clients that still use, very old, antiquated recruitment technology, recruitment techniques rather than technology, to recruit our own staff and get our own people in. And there's the traditional, buy the pen, buy the mug type scenario. And you get all the usual pros and cons of why you should buy this pen, its color, etc. Why you can buy this mug, it's got this, it's got that, the other. And the simple thing is just take the mug off them or take the pen off them and simply say, can you make me a cup of tea? And they go, I can't because I haven't got a mug. Well, now you've found the problem. Now you can. Now you've solved the problem. And I remember some guy saying to me a very similar thing, took the pen and he sat there looking at my boss at the time with the pen in his hand and he said, can you write down my salary now that you're going to pay me because I'm going to give you the best answer to your question? He said, no, I can't. He said, well, here's a pen. That's what you need. That's your problem, and solve this problem. And I think it's more interesting when you start to look at what people's problems are within the recruitment market, that how we can solve those for our clients and how we can make our clients look good and ease their employee journey through their business. Because we've given them data, we've given them information, and we've given them the best service that saves time and money for them overall. It's really important. And a lot of that we can now do through technology and through AI. So as Paul was saying there about, I'm not sure whether Manchester is the promised land or just the land on the other side of God's own country in Yorkshire, that, 1,000 people coming into a hotel, they're going to have a real problem there if they want to give those candidates a really good candidate journey of vetting all those candidates. And yet there is technology out there that could do that very, very quickly and provide them with a very, a small short list of candidates that they should be interviewing from there. And that you've got to think about what the candidate journey is like and what the client journey is for that. So you're going to find clients may want to try and do their recruitment by themselves, thinking they have that opportunity now because of AI. But that's what AI creates for them, an absolute huge headache. And if I go back to the early 2000s and the dot-com boom, that was then the recruitment market was dead. It's all going to be done electronically. Well, 20 years later, we're still here, bigger, stronger, and fatter than we were before. And we're still not worried about the technology. We're using technology to actually enhance our processes and give better value to our clients. So I think, again, as we've all said, whatever we do, whether you're driving down that RPO route or whether you're driving down that technology route, it's about giving something that gives your client a solution to their problems, and you need to be trained and skilled in that constantly. Otherwise, it's just a waste of money and a waste of your investment if you're never going to use the maximized tools from them. Which moves on to our sort of final topic, and we're sort of nearly there. We've been trying to do this, I think, for about 4 weeks now, Paul, and we've never finally got to this question regarding staff training and development. And I think this is obviously one of my great passions for those who've been on my Wednesday webinars. You know, training your staff is not just a 1 or 2 time process. And it's interesting sort of coming from the Adecco group, where their trainers had, you know, the ability to use all the material known to man to help train their staff. And yet each individual person in the Adecco group got on average 2.5 days worth of training a year from the training team. And yet the managers weren't allowed to actually be involved in training because they felt they couldn't deliver it. And one of my first roles as a director was to streamline training and redistribute how training took place. So I had my managers training and development staff every single week. I trained the staff to actually deliver training courses, and we created what we called training bites in a training briefcase. So the managers had that data there that they could use straight away. And sort of going out and consulting in the SME market, what we tend to find is that the training material is either old, it's been plundered from somewhere else and bastardized, or it's not there, it's just basically coming out of somebody's head, which means how do you actually train and develop your staff to become really good at recruitment? Yes, they can follow you, they can track you, they can sit next to you and listen to what you have to say and learn that way. But if you really want to make a difference and have staff loyalty and have staff that can bill regularly on a good basis and give really top quality service to your clients, then you need to be training on a regular basis. And that to me is weekly. And it's interesting when you start to look at building people's career paths. And we have this thing in recruitment about recruiting and then sort of promoting the best recruiter in the business. But yet we promote them to a management level, and yet we give them zero training on a management level, how to manage a team, how to develop a team, and we wonder why it goes wrong. And maybe we think, are they the right people, etc. Well, some might be, some might not be. But the fact that we haven't trained them at all is a real problem. So I think when we start to talk about everything we've talked about today, it is all underpinned by one thing: the ability for you to train and develop your staff and give them the best opportunity to give the best service to your clients. And I think it's got to start from inwards to outwards. And therefore, we've got to start to look at how we train our staff. So let's throw it back open to the pools on training, as we've all been involved in this quite a lot recently and over our numerous years of careers. Talk to me about training.
Well, just an interesting point here. Years ago, there used to be, some of you guys may remember this, there was a fad on a topic. It was called In Search of Excellence. And there were, in those days, videos and books and whatever. One of the big case studies about organizations developing their cultures, what we now call employer value propositions, was Walt Disney. And one of the things that's always stuck in my mind about training was that the people that received the most training in Disney World, either in California or in Florida, are the guys that sweep the streets, because they're the people that get more inquiries from the public than anybody else in Disney World. Where are the restaurants? Where are the loos? How do I get from here to here? And the people, therefore, that are the lowest paid operators in Walt Disney World, at least at that point, are the people that receive most coaching and training. And why? Because Walt Disney World recognized that to look after their customers, they'd break down, as I was saying earlier, the processes, they'd understand who is likely to be spoken to more than anybody else. And they figured out that it was these people who were on the streets and constantly the attendants and constantly being approached by the public. When you look at the training your people need in your business, What you've got to do, and I've said it already, is to look at the processes. Who's involved in which elements of the processes that you're going to reconstruct to provide outstanding customer service? How are they going to be trained in those elements? I said it already, break it down. I talked about the permanent placement process, at least 30 elements. Who's going to be dealing with every element? Or what training do they need to become outstanding at those various elements? You don't need to train somebody to do 30 elements perfectly. That's the wrong way to do this. You've got to understand which of your people are going to be dealing with which elements of the process and make sure they're great at those elements. Howard's 100% right. Training isn't something that you do once or twice a year or just for a few hours. It's something you commit to constantly. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're talking about bringing in, or perhaps you should be on occasions, expert trainers, external trainers. Perhaps that's something you should do, but you don't do that every week for lots of obvious reasons. Perhaps you're not big enough to have your own internal recruitment trainers, of course. But I think that it's something you as owners, as leaders, as experts, as experienced people should be giving of yourselves every single day. And that goes cascading down through the business so that each person is given an element of coaching and training that they have to give to other people in the business. One of the main reasons, and we should know this, that people leave jobs is because they feel undervalued, undertrained, they don't feel that they're being invested in. We know that. We hear that same story day in, day out when we interview candidates. Most people leave jobs not because of money, but because they don't feel that they're being invested in. Now, if we know that is a truth, which it is, then we've got to look internally at our own people. How much time and effort do we engage in training and coaching our people? And what do we call coaching and training? Is it classroom training, or is it a 20-minute mentoring discussion? Is it an hour's mentoring with somebody within our organization once a month, or an external mentor? What are we doing to make people feel highly valued by us? And how are we going to go forward in this new world of work to identify what specific training and coaching people are going to need? And keep in mind that it's so fast moving now, our environment, that whatever training you give to people in July and August and September, when you get round to next July, August and September, you'll need to be giving them a different form of training. The world will be different then than the one we're in now. So this is constantly evolving. If you invest in your people will invest in you, they'll invest in your business, and they will give out wonderful service to your clients and your candidates, which will result in increased turnover and profits. This is not money that you're spending, it's money you're investing. And that's so important. Paul?
I think for me, I think it probably starts at the top. And I think when you get to either director level or MD or business owner, I think actually you stop investing in yourself. And, I know Howard and Paul, you do an awful lot of this. I think for me, it's around making sure that the person at the top of the organization sort of keeps himself, sharp. Excuse the pun, that's no pun. But you've got to, if you're running 100 meters and you're trying to get under 10 seconds each time, you can't do that without a coach. And it's the same thing for running a business for me. So, some of the luckiest and best opportunities that I've had is when I've worked with a business coach. And I've done that quite a lot over the last sort of 3-4 years. Not because I'm crap, although maybe some people thought I was crap and I needed the training, but more to help me, get better and achieve more and, be more embracing and more encompassing. I think that's where a coach can come in and really sort of help and support. I think the next thing I'd add is that sometimes we don't link work with personal life. And I think, I don't think there are boundaries now. I think it's just life as a whole. And therefore, some of the questions that I would ask my consultants would be, what do you want to achieve in the next 3 years? And then they will probably answer that straight from a work perspective. But what I want to understand is, what are the drivers? Do they want to save up for a deposit for a house? Do they want to go traveling? Do they want to buy a car? What do they want to achieve in life? And then the work bit comes intrinsically linked in terms of it's a mechanism to help them get there. And then within the work bit, where do they want to get to? They might want to be a principal consultant this year, but they might want to be a senior principal consultant next year or a manager the next year. But it's about And I have this little nice little simple diagram called an orbit. It's about plotting your personal and work orbit on one sheet, getting that out every quarter, and having a constant conversation about making sure we're on track together, because it is a partnership, is learning and development, and we've got a part to play, making sure that that path is absolutely on track, and the two are intrinsically linked between personal and work. And if you understand that, and it's an interesting conversation and thing to go through, you can then sometimes understand what people's drivers are. And you said at the start, Paul, about, and I've heard you say this a couple of times, maybe now's the time to, you know, weed out your sort of bad apples, or the people that are in it for different things other than the team. By having that conversation, it's a really good way to sit down and understanding what people's personal motivators and drivers are. But as I said, to try and help them then put that into some sort of document and have a plan around it for the next sort of 3 years.
It's quite interesting, that comment. Always going to come back to culture and strategy to a certain degree. The strategy you put into train and develop people, and the culture you're trying to create. And there's that famous comment, isn't there, that culture will always outbeat strategy, but only if it's a really great culture. Where strategy will outbeat culture if you've got a big stick and a big carrot to be beating people with. However, if you have a great strategy and a brilliant culture, you almost become an unstoppable business. And so I think it's about thinking about how you develop that culture and how you develop that strategy. And I remember being a director and going out with virtually all of my staff, constantly going to see clients and helping them. And the time spent in the car going to and from the meeting, or sat on the train going to and from the meeting, or walking to and from a meeting, etc., was all about coaching and mentoring and developing them, and all about finding what you were talking about there, Paul, those little things, the little things that drive them, those little things that motivate them. And I always used to think about, there used to be a uniform way that we'd celebrate a deal, but then there'd be a certain thing that I would be doing for each individual person that was specific and specialized to them. So I had people would want me to walk over and tap them on the back and almost give them a bit of public adulation. Other people would just wanted a little note saying, well done. Other people just wanted a nod or a wink, etc. And I'd worked out what every single person, and that was 100 plus in my business, wanted, and then how I could motivate them. So you could motivate them with almost a look, a nod, a single word half the time. And that meant so much more than anything else. But that was to get to understand and know my people, but also help them. And so they were going, why do you want to come to this client meeting? You know, well, because I want to help develop your client so you can make more money. I want to help develop you so you can make more money. I want to help you become a better version of yourself. But your comment there was about, you know, what do we do with regards to ourselves when we get to that top, because we stop investing in ourselves. And I think that's where a lot of recruitment leaders become a bit misguided. I'm at the top and I know everything.
Absolutely.
I class myself as, I am intellectual humility. I do not know everything. I don't attend to know everything. I will read, I will look, I'll review, I will go find people that can help me develop myself. So even now at 30 years on, and I know Paul's exactly the same at 42 years on, etc., in the recruitment marketplace, we are still learning and developing our own portfolio of skills to help advance our clients' portfolio of skills. So us, learning and development never ever stops. That comment, every day is a learning day, is absolutely right. And you know, as those who know me know, I live by 3 very simple rules in my life. Every day, do the best you can. Every day, try and beat the day before. And every day, try have a bit of fun whilst doing it. But those first 2, try beat the day before, is a very interesting view, because I always know then where I'm going to be. So I know where my day's finished, so I know what I've got to beat. So I'm thinking, yes, I had a really good day. I'm thinking, how am I going to beat that today? But I don't beat myself if I don't beat it. But I look at what input I've put into my day to do that. And to do that, it's all about training myself to do that. It's like going to the gym. You wouldn't go to the gym and hop on one leg if you're learning to run, would you? And then hop on the other leg. You know, you use both legs at the same time. So we've got to make sure that we're doing the right things for our team constantly to train them. So I think as leaders, being intellectually, having that intellectual humility and self-awareness of the lack of your knowledge is really important. And that means going out to outside, whether it's webinars like this, finding people like Paul and I and yourself, Paul, that train and develop people from there, or going to other services, whatever it be. It's important that you develop yourself, because as goes the head, goes the business.
100%.
Guys, we're absolutely spot on at 1:30. It sounds strange for saying 1:30 after all these weeks at the usual time. Guys, I'd like to sort of cut it off there. Paul and Paul, thank you very much for your time again. It's been very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Guys, I'd like to thank you for your time. If you've got any questions, feel free to put them into the chat box or the question bar now, and we can answer them. If not, I've got a cornetto waiting for me. So I'm happy to go take my cornetto. So Paul's, thank you very much for your time. It's been much appreciated. Mr. Sharpe, I'm not going to press gang you into next week, but I may come back to you at some time in the future and bring you to more of these things. Okay. It's been a pleasure talking to you and a pleasure working with you. Guys, thank you very much for your time today. We'll see you all next week at our new time of 12:30.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Be safe.